All right, guys, today we're using the quadratic formula to solve equations, quadratic equations, especially quadratic equations that we cannot factor. So far, anytime I've given you a quadratic equation, you've been able to do the big X method and find two numbers that add up and multiply to be the numbers that we need. The problem we have today, if you look at this first example, if I try to do the big X method, I need numbers that multiply to negative 10 and add up to 2. Well, 10 is 1 times 10 or 2 times 5. Those are my only options without getting into decimals. And none of those will add up to 2, which means my numbers are going to be decimals. And you don't want to start guessing decimals. That's miserable. I can divide by 2.5, that's 4. I can divide by 1.25, that's 8. But none of those work, and any others are going to be really miserable and a mess to try to solve. So rather than trying to come up with decimals, if I ever try to do the big X method and I can't find numbers that work, someone came up with this really cool formula that will tell you the numbers that will work. Now, there are downsides to the formula. I mean, look at this thing. There are letters and numbers and pluses and a fraction and a square root and a square. It's a mess. But it's a great formula because it always works. So here's how the formula works. When you have a quadratic equation in standard form, you usually have a number in front of x squared. We call that number a. We usually have a number in front of b, or in front of x. We're going to call that b. And then we usually have a c value or a number all by itself, right? Now the formula, if you notice, has those same letters. A is right here. B, there's two of them. One is right here on the inside getting squared. One is right here in front of a negative sign. And then we have a C value at the end. Oh, and I forgot to mark the A value on the bottom. So when I look at a quadratic equation, if I can see these numbers, I have the option to plug them into this formula, put it in my calculator, or solve it using smaller bits of, well, I guess it's still your calculator, but doing little pieces. But you put it in your calculator and you get an answer. Few things you need to be very careful of with the quadratic formula. First thing is this number right here is being a negative. What that means is, notice in the formula it's a positive, but in the equation it's a negative. That means that whatever b is, that front number is the opposite of b. So if my equation has a 3x right here, then my b is negative 3. But if my equation has a negative 6x, then that number in front switches to a positive. So you've got to be really careful that you switch that first number. The other thing that you might notice is in the middle right here, I have a plus and a minus. You have to do this equation twice in your calculator. Once, you're going to use the plus button. The second time, you're going to use the minus button, because you're going to get two different answers. Remember, when I solve a quadratic, my quadratic crosses in two places. The positive gives you one of those. The negative gives you the other one. So one way that can help you not make mistakes using this equation is to put all of the letters in parentheses. So if this B had a parenthesis and this B had a parenthesis, and the A and the C and the A. The nice thing about that is when you plug it in your calculator, you don't have to worry about negatives and positives and what sign should go where. You just plug in the numbers in front inside parentheses, and your calculator will take care of the algebra for you. So let me show you an example. Example number A. For this first one, I'll try to leave the formula where you can see it. Example A says x squared plus 2x minus 10 equals 0. I need A, I need B, I need C. So A is the number in front of x squared. In this case, there is no number. So technically it's a 1, we just don't write it. I need my B value, positive 2, and I need my C value, negative 10. So my equation that I really need you to write on the paper before you type it in your calculator looks like this. X equals plus, we're getting ahead of ourselves. That negative B, you have two options. I would tell you, make it a negative sign, put a parenthesis, put B on the inside, and then you don't have to worry about changing anything. Then I've got a plus and a minus, and then I've got this square root symbol. Notice that all of this information is under the square root. So when you are going to type this in your calculator, you want to make sure that square root symbol goes all the way to the end of the C value. So B squared. I'm going to put a parenthesis, I'm going to put B in it, and I'm going to put a square. Then I'm going to put a minus sign, and then a 4. A is 1, so I'm going to put a parenthesis with a 1 in it. C is negative 10, so I'm going to put a parenthesis with a negative in it. This bar needs to go all the way past that last number. That is just the top of my fraction. On the bottom of my fraction, I'm going to put a 2, and then I'm going to put an A, which is 1. Now, to type this in your calculator, for the most part, you can make it look exactly like this. The first button that you're going to hit is the fraction button so that you get that fraction bar. Then you need to type in the top. But remember, you've got to choose the plus or the minus. The first time you're going to use the plus. Then you're going to go to the bottom and you're going to type in 2 parenthesis 1 parenthesis. After you do all that, you're going to hit enter and you are going to get an X value. I have no idea what that X value is. I haven't typed these in my calculator yet, and I'm not going to make you sit there while I do it. After I use the plus button, I'm going to do that entire equation in my calculator again, but this time I'm going to use the minus button. So I'm going to make a fraction. I'm going to type in negative parenthesis 2 parenthesis minus square root. I'm going to type in the whole thing one more time, and that's going to give me a second answer for X. That tells you the solutions to this quadratic equation without having to do the big X method and all of that. No factoring, no nothing. You get two answers. Okay, example B. 2x squared plus 19x plus 30. Those numbers are huge. I don't even want to try to factor this one. I'm just going to use the quadratic formula. So A is in front of x squared. It's a 2. B is in front of x. It's a 19. C is in front of, well, nothing. It's all by itself. It's 30. Now I'm going to write my equation before I type it in the calculator. X equals negative parenthesis. The B goes in this first parenthesis. Plus minus square root. B 19 squared minus 4 parenthesis A parenthesis C. All of that is on top of the fraction. On the bottom of the fraction is just 2 times 2. You're going to type that in your calculator twice. The first time you're going to use the plus. The second time you're going to use the minus. And that's going to give you two different answers for X. All right, let's set up two more. And then it wants us to graph, but we'll come back to that one in a minute. because I don't know if I want to make you sit through me typing it in the calculator. It takes a long time. It's a pain in the butt to type it in. Like I said, there's good and bad things about the quadratic formula. The good thing is it always works. The bad thing is it takes a long time to plug it in. So example C, A is 1, B is 4, C is -9. So my quadratic formula, x equals negative parenthesis 4 plus or minus the square root parenthesis 4 squared minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is -9, all divided by 2 parenthesis 1. You're going to type it in the calculator twice, once with the plus, once with the minus, and you get 2 answers. Every once in a while, you'll actually get the same number twice. That does happen. Sometimes if this part of the equation happens to be 0, then it doesn't matter if you add it or subtract it. You get the same answer. So, for example, if I were to do the quadratic formula for, let's see, x squared minus 4x plus 4, then my A would be 1, my B would be -4, and my C would be +4. So my formula, x equals negative parenthesis, -4 plus minus square root. B is -4 squared minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is 4, divided by 2 times A. This one, when I plug it in my calculator, this part right here is just 0. So this becomes 0. Well, the square root of 0 is 0. So when I type in negative, well, I guess it becomes a positive. When I type in -4 plus 0, I get the same thing as when I type in -4 minus 0. So that can happen where you can get 2 x's, but they're the same x. But it doesn't usually happen when you're using the quadratic formula. Mostly because if that were the case, you probably would be able to big X and find the answer that way, which is a lot faster than the quadratic formula. Okay, last one. -3x squared minus x plus 20. A is -3. B is in front of x. It's -1. And C is 20. So when I plug in to the quadratic formula, I get negative parenthesis -1 plus or minus square root -1 squared minus 4 times -3 times 20, all divided by 2 times -3. You type that in your calculator twice, once with the plus, once with the minus, and you get 2 answers for x. Okay, the last one, all it wants you to do is what we just did, but then it wants you to graph the function. So it wants you to take these x values and actually put them on the graph so that you could draw it. I don't know those x values because I haven't done this question yet. So we'll let you do that one on your own. If you need help with it, come on into class. Most of you are doing this in class with me anyway, so I don't think that's going to affect you very much. Come see me if you have any problems. Otherwise, turn this in on Canvas when you're done.